Hello and welcome from the Doctor's Desk. This segment where we focus on doctors and what they are doing to help patients in the Arklatex region. And I'm joined by the doctors from the cataract surgeons, Dr. Chris Shelby and Dr. White Coleman. Welcome.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, it's good to be here.
Well, we are talking about cataracts since that is, it sounds like your specialty. So first thing, why don't you explain what happens to a patient in a cataract surgery?
Well, you know, a cataract surgery is where you go take out the natural lens that becomes cloudy over time and you replace it with a clear plastic lens implant. So you get more light on the back of the eye, you put things in better focus. And in a lot of cases, even people who've worn glasses or contacts their whole life to see clearly can get independent of the glasses or contacts at the time of modern cataract surgery. That's where a lot of the advancements have been made.
Okay, and the need for cataract surgery, what brings on this need?
Generally birthdays. As we get older, a cataract is simply a color change of your God-given lens. So when we're first born, our lenses are crystal clear like a glass of water. As we get older, it's like taking Coca-Cola, slowly pouring that glass of water. It slowly turns kind of yellowish brown. That happens to everybody. Now, not necessarily everybody needs cataract surgery, but most everybody will notice that decrease in contrast sensitivity, increased glare at nighttime, and just an overall decrease in vision. And that generally becomes really symptomatic in your 50s, 60s, and especially 70s.
Are there things we can do to prevent that advancement, or is it inevitable?
It's somewhat inevitable. You know, it's sort of a biological barometer. So if you have a lot of chronic health conditions, diabetes, autoimmune diseases, people that have those things get cataracts earlier. But if you live long enough, eventually you're going to get them. You know, sometimes we do it on people who are in their 30s or 40s, and for specific reasons they get them earlier. Sometimes, you know, I did a 102-year-old the other day. That was my personal record.
Their first cataract surgery?
Yeah, he never had cataract surgery.
Wow.
I've been telling him he needed it for 10 years. He'd probably need it for about 30. But you know, he put it off, and you know, better late than never. Mm-hmm. If you live long enough, you're going to need it. So we have a question a lot of times of what happens. You know, your eye doctor tells you have cataracts. What happens next? What is the next step in the process? And we were going to go over a few of those things today, just for our patients to be clear on what do you expect when you come into the office and you've been told you have cataracts, because it's a little bit of an anxiety-ridden process. Sure. Sometimes, you know, nobody wants to have surgery on their eyes. Like Dr. Shelby says, it's all minor surgery until it's on you, and then it's major surgery. So we're going to try to go over a little bit of that process so people know what to expect.
Well, this segment is called From the Doctor's Desk. So these are the questions and decisions you make as doctors. So one of the things you mentioned was you replace it with basically a lens that has been created. What informs the choice of the lens? What choice is right?
Well, it all depends on what the patient wants and how their eye is before surgery. So we have lenses that will put patients in great distance vision. We have lenses that allow distance, intermediate, and near vision. We have lenses that correct astigmatism. We have lenses that you can adjust with light. The good news nowadays about cataract surgery is you got a lot of choices when it comes to lenses. The bad news nowadays about cataract surgery is you got a lot of choices when it comes to lenses. And it's all based on how a patient wants to see when it's all said and done. And that is dictated by the preoperative measurements that we take in clinic. And we do very in-depth measurements, and we look at all parts of the eye, the retina, which is the back part of the eye. We look at the cornea to make sure there's no defects there, and then we measure the length of the eye, where the lens sits in the eye, because that's an important predictive value. And so based on a lot of these measurements and the health of someone's eyes, then they can, or we can choose or help them choose a lens that's best for them.
So we have some graphics, and do you want to explain what we're going to see in our first graphic?
Yeah, we were just going to go through the basic testing that would be done on every cataract patient. So we talk a lot about individual lenses, and there's a lot of marketing surrounding individual lenses, but I think that's less important than the process by which the decision's made on what lens you need. So some people come in and they say, my friend had this lens, or I saw this lens in an advertisement, that's the one that I want. But really it depends on the measurements that are taken when we come in the office. So we're just going to go through some of those and give a little overview of what the significance of those are and what people can expect to have done when they come in for a cataract eval, and then get on in the next segment to what the specific lens options are, because I think that's a conversation that has to be had after we look at the testing. So that's sort of the same workflow that we follow when someone comes in for a cataract eval.
Okay, well, let's pop the first graphic up. What are we looking at here?
So this is called a Pinacam, and this is a detailed corneal topography. So that's like a topographical map of the surface of your eye, where we can see astigmatism, we can see the power of the cornea, we can see if there's any abnormalities, we can see where people have had previous refractive surgery. I would say to patients watching this, make sure you let us know if you've had previous refractive surgery like LASIK, RK, PRK. But it's not necessary. We can usually identify it on this image. And you can take the image down now. That was just an idea of what the graphic looks like. So that's our first piece of equipment that we would use when someone comes in. It's called a Pinacam. I think it should be done on every cataract patient. And that gives us a real detailed look of what the surface of the cornea looks like and the health of that to say, is it normal or is it abnormal? And if it's normal, then we rule people in for things like multifocal lenses. We also look at a few more aspects of the eye. And if it's abnormal, there's other ways that we can go, but that's the first piece of testing. And then we can pop up the second one. Really, it's four. It's a Pinacam, an Argos, which measures the length of the eye. Then we take a photo of the back of the eye, and then we do a scan of the retina.
So what are we looking at here?
I'll let Dr. Shelby take
Yeah,
that
so
one.
this is what we call an OCT of the macula. This is the scan of the back of the eye. This is the business end of your eyeball. So, light, light focuses from your cornea, the front clear part, hits your lens, and then focuses on that little bitty divot in the center of those bottom two pictures. Okay. That's called your fovea. And so we look at to make sure that that's healthy, that there's no swelling, bleeding. We can see macular degeneration here. And those things tell us what your potential vision can be. And so if there's scarring, if there's something wrong, then we can say, okay, you're not a candidate for certain lenses like a multifocal or some other premium lens, but it can help direct our decisions towards something else. And so this is an imperative piece of machinery that we have to make sure we get these images when we do preoperative measurements.
So you explained that's the back of the eye. Is that little divot, is that what connects the eye and everything, all the information it's taking into the brain that communicates what we're seeing?
Well, your whole retina does that, but your central clear vision comes from that little tiny divot right in the center. So we want to make sure that's normal and there's no pathology there, because that would be a reason for vision loss that's not from a cataract. So that's the first thing we want to say is your vision loss just from a cataract or is it from something else? Now, if it's from something else, then you may have two causes of vision loss. Then we may have less certainty about what your visual potential is after cataract surgery, and that's going to affect our decision making in terms of what lens we're going to use or what type of cataract surgery we're going to do. And maybe you need to see a retina specialist to get some of those things cleared up. When people have diabetes, you'll see swelling there. People can have things called an epiretinal membrane where there's a little film that grows over that. Those things can be addressed either before or after cataract surgery, depending on the severity. But it mainly confirms to us, in most cases in a normal eye, that the cataract is the only cause of vision loss. And that sort of opens the door to what's the decision that's made next. What lens are you a candidate for?
Okay, all right. We have more graphics, so let's pop number 3 up so that we can take a look at it. What are we looking at here, gentlemen?
So this is what's called an Argos. This is a biometry. That's taking a detailed measurement of the length of the eye, and then it's taking a detailed measurement of how powerful the cornea is. And we can detect astigmatism here too. We've got 4 or 5 measurements of astigmatism so that we have a lot of confidence on how much astigmatism is present so that we can accurately correct it at the time of cataract surgery. I think you can pull the graphic down. And some people say, well, do you need to know my glasses prescription in order to determine what lens power I need when we do cataract surgery? Well, no, we don't really, because when you go and take out the natural lens, we're removing that focusing power from the eye. Completely. So 2/3 of the focusing power of the eye is in the cornea, the clear part on the front of the eye. About 1/3 is in the lens, and that's where the cataract forms. So that measurement is saying, how much focusing power is there in the cornea? How long is the eye? So how much focusing power do we need to replace to put that beam of light in perfect focus on that little divot in the retina where your central clear vision comes from? So those measurements are critical, and a lot of the advancements that have occurred over the past decade or so in cataract surgery is the ability to get really accurate measurements and say, we for sure know with a high level of accuracy, 98 or 99% chance, that this lens power is going to put the light in focus at that point on the retina. And so we have a few thousand of these lenses in stock. And so the trick is to use that data to pick the correct lens to put light in perfect focus on the retina without the need for glasses afterwards.
Because at a certain point, that sounds like it's math and angles and things like that.
Yes, there's a lot of back-end math
I don't know
involved.
much about math, but that part I do.
There is a fair amount of math.
All right. So we do have another graphic. Let's talk about that. Okay, what are we looking at here, gentlemen?
So this is what we call an optos. This is actually a photograph of the retina itself. And we get this every time also. We can use this in conjunction with that OCT you saw earlier. But this tells us the anatomy of the back of the eye. And so when you look closely, the little white spots, that's your optic nerve. So that's actually where all those neurons from the retina run into and then go off to your brain so you can interpret these images. That corresponds to the natural blind spot that we all have. You know, we all have a normal blind spot. You don't notice it because your visual fields overlap. And then to the to the right or the left of the image, whichever one you're looking at, you can see that darker spot within the blood vessels. That's where the macula is. And so that's the very center of the vision. And so this tells us a lot of information also that we might not pick up on the OCT, like if there's scarring, if there's bleeding, if there's some other pathology going on in the back of the eye. This is how we detect retinal tears, floaters, retinal detachments, things like that.
Floaters, explain that to me.
You know, floater is, everybody has floaters, first of all. You know, sometimes it can be startling when they first happen. And we can see them on that imagery.
Okay.
So you can usually see a floater creating a shadow on the retina. But basically, the space in the back of your eye is taken up with a substance called vitreous. Vitreous is a jelly-type substance. And as you get older, it becomes more watery and it also shrinks some. So when you're young, it's firmly adherent to the retina. As you get older, it pulls away from the retina in places and it can take a little piece of tissue with it. And you can also see the interface between the jelly-type substance and the watery-type substance. And that's what creates a floater. It basically is casting a shadow on the retina. You know, you look around, you see it go by, you may swat at a gnat every now and then that's not actually there. Floaters are usually a nuisance. Most floaters are just a nuisance. They're annoying. Everybody has them. You kind of got to live with them. I've got a few. I'm sure Dr. Shelby has a few. Some people have floaters that are debilitating, that are a huge blob, and they come to rest in the central vision. They don't just go by every now and then, but they'll actually, you can measure the visual acuity reduction when the floater comes to rest right in the middle of your visual axis. You know, it's almost like a dot that you're seeing right in the center. Those we can laser, and we can break them into smaller pieces, move them around. In extreme cases, we can send them to our retina colleagues to go remove them completely if they're really debilitating. Most of them are a nuisance. In this photo, the imagery helps us define what if someone's seeing a floater or someone's seeing something else.
So this differentiates between a possible just small laser operation versus a cataract surgery.
Well, the cataract's something that we're looking at on a different exam, but basically we can see a floater there and we can let someone know, hey, you've got a few floaters. Be aware of that. Now, it's not uncommon after cataract surgery to notice floaters more. And you notice them more not because there are more floaters, but just because when you get a higher level of visual acuity, you have higher visual quality, you notice subtleties like floaters more. So it's not uncommon to do cataract surgery and then someone says, wow, I see a lot of new floaters that I didn't see before. That's not necessarily because there's more, it's just because you notice them with a better quality of vision.
It's kind of like some people see wrinkles after cataract surgery.
Really?
Yeah, we've been accused of giving wrinkles because
That happens a lot.
Yeah, that does happen a lot. And so I just want everybody to know that cataract surgery does not cause wrinkles.
Just because they can see them.
Yeah,
a
just
little
because you
more
can see them
clear.
better, you know.
You know, I had an old friend who was about 90, maybe 91 or 92 years old, and he said, gosh, you know, my vision's getting a lot worse, and I fly some, and he's an air show guy, and he said, my vision's gotten a lot worse, and you know, I don't know what's causing it. Can I come see you? And he lived out in Arizona. And I said, well, Big B, how long ago was it that you had cataract surgery? And he said, well, I've never had cataract surgery. And I said, well, I don't need to see you in clinic. Like, that's the problem. You're 92 years old. He was in great shape otherwise, and he sent me a nice letter after his cataract surgery, and he says, I see better than I've seen in the last 25 years, but my dandruff is worse than ever.
He thought it was causal. It wasn't. It was just the recognition of it. Well, let's talk about, because we're getting close to the end of our time here, but let's talk about some of the, I guess, more interesting stories you have about lens choices. I mean, do people come into you and they just are thinking that they know best when it comes to which lens choice is correct?
We do. I mean, we have a lot of patients because information's out there, you know, of course. And
Anyone could Google.
oh yeah, it's simple, and it always makes us nervous when we see somebody who's got pages and pages of printed stuff. But a lot of patients come in and they'll say, hey, I want this lens. And it's like, why do you want this lens? Like light adjustable, let's say. And they say, well, my neighbor got it, or I've got a friend, or my cousin, whatever. And so that does open up, that prompts a conversation, because they're generally not aware of all the other options that they have. And so that's one of the nice things about doing all the preoperative measurements that we do, because we can start to go over that information with them. And then it's incredibly important to understand how they want to see. You know, it's like, are you a hunter? You know, are you a pilot? Do you like to golf most of the time?
Do you like to read?
Yes. Are you a big reader? Do you like to sew? Because sometimes, you know, a multifocal may not be the best option. It may be best to set them with near vision. They may be okay with wearing glasses to drive, or vice versa. You know, or did they wear monovision contact lenses? You know, one eye distance, one eye up close. These are all important questions for us to know, so we can then direct that conversation. Now, we do have a lot of patients that come in saying, I want the best lens possible. And so it's like, why do you want the best lens possible? Because I want to be out of glasses. Okay, that's what we need to know. Then we can do that based on the information that we have. And then that being said, we do have patients that come in and say, look, I don't want a lens, because a lot of people will think, oh, if they get a lens, it costs more. And it doesn't. Everybody gets a lens with cataract surgery. The standard monofocal lens is covered by insurance and Medicare, and that one's optically perfect. I have that one in my right eye because I wanted to maximize my distance vision. And we thought I needed a toric before I had all the measurements. And when we did the measurements, I didn't need a toric. And so I have the standard monofocal aspheric lens in my right eye to maximize distance vision. It was covered by insurance, and I have never seen this well at a distance. You know, and so you never know what it is until we get all the information.
You mentioned monovision, because I'm curious about this, because I have monovision contacts, and for people who don't know, in my left non-dominant eye, I have a good contact lens for reading, which is important when you're reading scripts, and then in my right, I have a good distance one for driving and reading the teleprompter. So is there a lens choice for me that would satisfy both those needs?
That's a great question. That comes up a lot. So there's basically two paths to total glasses independence after cataract surgery. One is monovision, and the other is a multifocal lens. For monovision, it's usually people who've been in contacts for a long time, and they say, I like this, I can tolerate this, because there are a certain percentage of people, about 10% of women and about 50% of men, that do not tolerate monovision. So we want to make sure that we know they can tolerate it before we do it. You know, mainly that's people who've done it in contacts or have had LASIK or refractive surgery in the past for monovision. So if you're already in that and you know you like it, that's a slam dunk. As long as all the measurements are normal, that's an easy path to glasses independence. If someone's never tried it before and all the measurements are normal, then a multifocal lens would probably be the path that we go down. And then you have other people who say, you know, like I see a lot of pilots because I fly, and so they come see me for cataract surgery. Pilots need to be in focus, especially commercial pilots who fly for a living. You need maximum quality distance vision. If you're shooting a low instrument approach with 200 people in the back, you know, in poor weather, you need to be able to see the runway you're landing on as good as possible with both eyes together. So I would say in those cases, or truckers who drive for a living, we need maximum quality distant vision. So then we want both eyes in focus at distance, and we would just have to live with the burden of wearing readers to see up close. And that's a good option too. But those 4 tests that we put up there, you know, you sort of get a battery of tests when you come in, so people should be prepared for that. The eyes are going to get dilated. It takes a little time. This is an hour or 2 visit to get all this stuff done, dilate the eyes, and do a good exam to make a choice. But we start with the premise of, we assume that most people want maximum glasses independence. We're going to let you know, based on your objective testing, what you're a candidate for, and then also say, what is your desire? And then mix those two together to come up with the best option.
Well, doctors, we are from the Doctor's Desk. We hope you've enjoyed this show.